In recent weeks, a new fissure is emerging in global politics that could turn into a full-blown rupture. Japan has finally fallen out with the United States. Against the backdrop of yet another round of the trade war initiated by Donald Trump's administration, Tokyo, according to Financial Times and Japan's Asahi Shimbun, is beginning to reconsider its entire foreign policy direction. The decisive moment came after a closed-door meeting between Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba and senior Chinese officials in Beijing. Insiders close to the Japanese cabinet claim that it was there that a fateful decision was made. Japan is ready to significantly reduce its dependence on the United States, not only economically, but also militarily. This is no longer merely a diplomatic gesture, it is a blow to the entire U.S. security architecture in the Asia-Pacific region. Washington, according to sources in the New York Times, was shocked by the speed with which Japanese leadership changed its rhetoric. Just a few years ago, Tokyo was called the unsinkable U.S. aircraft carrier in the Far East. Japan was a key link in the system for containing China. Tens of thousands of American troops are stationed there, along with air bases in Okinawa, missile defense stations, and command centers. U.S. analysts at the Pentagon referred to the alliance with Japan as a stool leg, without which the U.S. security structure in the region could not stand. And now that leg has developed a serious crack. According to Nikkei Asia, after talks with the Chinese delegation, Ishiba stated at a closed meeting that Japan must attain strategic autonomy and stop playing the role of junior partner in the alliance with the United States. This sounded like an outright challenge to Washington. Within days, the Japanese Ministry of Defense prepared a plan for the gradual reduction of military cooperation with the U.S. Among the first steps are reducing joint exercises in the Pacific, limiting U.S. access to Japanese infrastructure, and eventually a complete revision of the security treaty signed back in 1960. Foreign policy, citing insiders in Japan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, reports that in the coming months, a dual-track program will be launched. On one hand, Japan will formally remain a U.S. ally, while on the other, it will begin closer engagement with China in economic, energy, and even military spheres. If this course is fully implemented, America risks losing its most reliable partner in Asia. The importance of Japan to the United States cannot be overstated. Joint military exercises, such as Keen Sword and RIMPAC, were the cornerstone of U.S. power projection in the region. During these maneuvers, American and Japanese forces practiced scenarios for missile defense, anti-submarine operations, and even amphibious landings under potential threats from China or North Korea. Dozens of ships, hundreds of aircraft, and thousands of personnel participated. These exercises always demonstrated to the world that the US and Japan act as a single entity. Now, that demonstration may become a thing of the past. If Japan truly ends military cooperation with the US, the consequences will be catastrophic for the entire U.S. security system. Without Japanese bases, American aircraft carriers will lack operational support in the Pacific. The range of control will shrink, logistics chains will lengthen, and vulnerability to Chinese naval and missile forces will increase. According to analysts at the Rand Corporation, in a crisis over Taiwan, the U.S. would have to act almost blindly, without the usual reliance on Japanese bases and intelligence centers. This would lead to a strategic failure comparable to the loss of a key ally in Europe during the Cold War. It is unsurprising that alarm bells are ringing in Washington. According to Wall Street Journal, the White House is preparing an urgent State Department mission to Tokyo. Trump personally demands that advisors find a way to keep Japan within the U.S. sphere of influence. But the situation is complicated by the fact that Trump himself has become the main source of irritation for the Japanese. His tariff policies and constant threats toward trade partners have undermined trust in America. Japan, whose economy heavily depends on stable exports to the United States, has come under pressure. Now, with China offering an alternative in the form of access to its enormous market, Japanese elites are increasingly viewing it as more advantageous to turn toward Beijing rather than endlessly endure Trump's whims. According to the Chatham House think tank, Tokyo's new policy could become a catalyst for a global reassessment of alliances. If Japan withdraws from under the U.S. military umbrella, it will pave the way for China to dominate the Pacific. South Korea, the Philippines, and even Australia may begin to question whether they should continue relying on the US, if even Japan is changing course. In this scenario, Washington risks isolation, while China would gain the status of the main security guarantor in Asia. Behind the scenes, scenarios are already being discussed in which Japan completely revises its alliance with the US and signs a new security agreement with China. This may sound far-fetched, but as Le Monde notes, just 5 years ago, no one could have imagined Europe seriously considering military cooperation with China. The world is changing rapidly, and what seemed impossible yesterday is becoming a political trend today. Former diplomats interviewed by Kyoto News argue that the key problem is Trump's failure to grasp the depth of the crisis. His reliance on ultimatums and tariff pressure is working against him. The Japanese are tired of being hostages to someone else's ambitions, while China is skillfully exploiting the moment, offering equal partnership and investments in exchange for a gradual disengagement from the US. If Washington does not change its approach in the coming months, America risks losing Japan permanently. This would signify the end of American hegemony in the Pacific, the rise of China, and the beginning of a new era in global politics. According to experts at South China Morning Post, Beijing is already considering the scenario of conducting joint naval exercises with Japan. While still unofficial, the very discussion speaks volumes. If such maneuvers take place, it would be a real shock to Washington. Until recently, Japanese Kongo-class destroyers and US Ticonderoga-class cruisers practiced missile defense together under the Aegis program. Now, Tokyo could begin training in similar scenarios alongside Chinese frigates and submarines. Analysts at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington warn that if Japan allows China access to joint missile defense systems and intelligence sharing, the regional balance of power will shift irreversibly. Furthermore, according to Reuters insiders, Tokyo is discussing gradually phasing out US F-35 fighters in favor of joint development with China. Officially, this is presented as diversifying military procurement, but in reality, it signals that Japan no longer wants to rely on Washington for military technology. If this happens, US companies such as Lockheed Martin could lose multi-billion-dollar contracts, while Beijing gains the opportunity to integrate Japan into its defense industry. This is why analysts increasingly suggest that Japan could become the domino whose fall triggers a chain reaction. If Washington cannot find a way to stop this process, in the coming years, we may witness the Pacific region completely slipping out of US control and transforming into a zone of Chinese influence.